Thank you. Thank you very much, Samir, once again for a very warm introduction. And good evening to all of you. I'm very pleased to be here to address such eminent group of experts from think tanks around the world, research institutions, members of task forces, for this very important engagement group. Thanks so much for your presence in India for the last 2 days and today in this session. First and foremost, let me congratulate the organizers of this conference for the wonderful arrangements, the extremely rich discussions and experiences. I also hope the delegates had a great visit to Rashtrapati Bhavan. It is indeed very impressive and magnificent. It is home to the president of the world's largest democracy, after all. Colleagues, distinguished guests, as I listened to the deliberations over the last 2 days, I'm very encouraged by this great start to this very important year, bringing together the best minds to initiate discussions around matters foremost in our minds today against such a prestigious backdrop. Thank you to all of you. The T20 Inception Conference coincided with another historic event held in New Delhi over the last 2 days, and I want to speak a little bit to that. Yesterday evening marked the conclusion of the first ever Voice of Global South Summit, hosted by India. The summit, held under the leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, engaged more than 120 countries at the highest levels and saw participation from heads of states, heads of governments, ministers from so many countries of the Global South. The unprecedented meeting held over last 2 days discussed several issues important to concerns of Global South under the theme Unity of Voice, Unity of Purpose in a virtual format. This meeting took place at a critical time indeed. It is an increasingly fragmented world that we see today, and at a time when the developing countries are dealing with multiple crises at the same time, hope and action were the two key words we heard repeatedly from leaders of the countries of the Global South in these last 2 days. It was indeed very inspiring. Colleagues, you have discussed and debated the scale and scope of challenges that confront us. We don't need to get into details of that. They're indeed unprecedented. The devastation brought by COVID-19 pandemic has only been exacerbated by the current geopolitical conflicts. The resulting insecurities in supply and distribution of food, fuel, fertilizers have deepened the challenges faced by the poor and vulnerable populations around the world. With worrying indicators coming in on reversal of the progress of SDGs, we are confronted with diminishing hopes of people all around the world. Those who had seen the promise of an interconnected world are now faced with a world with taller walls, fragile and overworked social support and health systems, and an uncertain future with little in reserves. Furthermore, the archaic setup of multilateral institutions has resulted in limited access to international markets and inadequate financing mechanisms. This has further restricted the growth prospects of Global South countries. Indeed, as countries fall into policy paralysis under the tremendous and unfair debt burdens, deal with unviable projects, the international finance institutions and the multilateral development banks have only been watching from the side. This needs to change. What we need is strong multilateral action and the weight of international institutions behind them to power green transitions which are really just, and support a new growth model in developing countries which does not see trade-offs between growth and sustainability. The importance of development agenda does not only follow from our moral obligation to our people, but also the interlinkages and interconnectedness of peace, security, and development issues. It is also the idea behind the theme of our G20 presidency, as it represents India's vision and hope for our one earth and for humanity to act as one family for a one interconnected future. We strongly believe that by focusing on helping those most in need, the world will find a way and will find a path to emerge out of the divisions that the world is facing. We saw an example of that in Bali last year, when the emerging market economies took lead in galvanizing consensus on a very important and very robust G20 declaration. As a developing country and the current presidency of the important grouping like G20, we have envisaged an ambitious agenda on development issues, anchored in the G20 Development Group. As part of our ambition to make our presidency action-oriented, we are committed to drive consensus on a Green Development Pact of the G20 leaders, which will be blueprint for strong actions for the next decade, powering green development all around the world, especially in developing countries. This will be achieved through investments in sustainable lifestyles, leveraging green hydrogen for climate action, circular economy, accelerating progress on SDGs, amongst other things. One of the critical pillars indeed is going to be sustainable lifestyles. Let me pause here to acknowledge that I have such a pleasure to know that Think20 India has taken up life as a priority area. Let me emphasize also here that it will be important to cover aspects under life that are not only limited to individual and demand-side nudges, but also supply-side ecosystems and creating inclusive infrastructure and policy environment that supports sustainable lifestyles at scale. I think it is unfair to continue to put the onus of going green on the consumer. We need to see green development and green production at scale so that it is actually sustainable. Coming back to the presidency priorities, I also want to tell you about our plans to drive actions on transformative areas such as digital, just green transition and women empowerment, which we hope will serve as critical enabler and will have multiplier effect on our efforts for achieving the sustainable development goals. This will be anchored as part of our efforts to mobilize support for a G20 action plan with collective strong actions to accelerate progress on the SDGs. We would also need to enhance international cooperation on data-related capacities, innovations, technology for this purpose. And therefore, we would also galvanize support for a capacity-building network on data for development. Colleagues, the reality is that we are indeed one human family on this one earth, and we do share an interconnected future, even if it may be hard to imagine that in the backdrop of a fragmented world. But for a moment, if we do take that leap of faith and imagine ourselves as one family and act as one family, what would we do? What solutions will we work towards? I think we would work toward a new human-centered globalization paradigm, which will not see growth and sustainability as a trade-off. We would create strong coalitions on resilient health systems with human well-being-centered approaches to prevent future pandemics. We would reinvigorate and reform the multilateral institutions, including those frozen in the 1945 paradigm, to enable them to act on the challenges of today and actually support progress on the development agenda, to assist developing countries in achieving their goals and deal with immediate challenges relating to debt distress, poverty. We will anchor our efforts in this regard on the principles of equity and common but differentiated responsibilities, because this is fundamental to the sustainability of our multilateral actions going forward. We would create robust new institutions to promote innovative multi-stakeholder partnerships for transformative transitions in key areas, such as health, education, women empowerment, fueled by technology and citizen participation. We would reaffirm the role of investing in peace rather than war and build a global consensus and dialogue and diplomacy. We would restore the sacred connection humanity shares with Mother Nature and promote and support green development by mobilizing necessary financing and enabling technology cooperation. Colleagues, people around the world are looking for hope, and dare I say, that hope must come through action. Strong, collective, multilateral action. As Prime Minister Modi has said, big responsibilities necessitate and call upon us, each of us, to take up even bigger and bolder ambitions. And this is exactly what we want to do. Having said that, let me also add that setting an ambitious goal is only taking a first step, possibly in the right direction. Building consensus, dealing with the vested interests, securing a buy-in of all stakeholders, and finding effective transitions to new paradigms, however, take continuous and patient efforts. This only tells us that we have many, many more steps to take. In the next couple of months and years, we only hope that we can take those steps together. I'm very pleased to see the agenda of Think20, and I really hope that that will feed directly into the actions, the very strong, collective, powerful actions that we want to galvanize during our presidency. I compliment you on an excellent start you've had and wish you all the very best for your year ahead. Thank you very much.